Dr. John here with NBC News on this Facebook Live. Coronavirus updates, and what I usually do Monday and Fridays is I give you an update of what's happened over the past week or the past weekend. In this case, what's been happening over this last week with coronavirus. So giving you a couple update on the headlines and getting a little deeper into the headlines, but also answering your questions. So if you have any questions, please forward them to us right now, and we'll go ahead and answer as many of those as we can. But the couple things I want to talk about. Number one, as far as the headlines, second wave, you're hearing that word pushed around a lot. Are we in a second wave? What's going to happen with the second wave? The reopenings, are they causing problems with the second wave? Right now, we are still in the midst of our first wave. And here's the reason why. So the first wave, we noticed early in February, March, we had this upswing on the curve. The curve started going up. We talk about flattening the curve, plateauing out the curve, bringing it under control. What's happened over the last couple of weeks is across the nation, we've gotten that more under control. We've come on the backside of that curve and gotten it more under control. The issue is now that there's been a lot of reopenings. Because of those reopenings, we knew we'd start to see more spikes in cases. We're starting to see those, so that curve's starting to go back up in certain areas. Not across the nation as a whole, but in certain areas. That's attributed to a couple of different things. Number one, more testing. We're certainly increasing our testing. And so because we're testing more people, we're also catching more people with coronavirus. That is adding to the numbers. But we're also seeing more hospitalizations. We're seeing a higher rate of positivity in some areas, which tells us that the case numbers themselves are actually increasing. We're just not catching more. They're actually increasing as well. So those two together kind of go hand in hand to push those numbers higher. But the bottom line is we do know these cases are going up. We want to get them under control, and that means making sure those spikes don't turn into an outbreak. But as far as the second wave, first wave, most experts are saying, and I agree, that right now we're still at the end of our first wave. That first wave is going to start to spike up more. We'll know when that first wave is under control, and the reason we call it in the fall the second wave is because over the summer, we're going to start seeing these numbers come down to a level that's kind of a subcurrent of coronavirus that's around the country and around the world. As that subcurrent starts getting higher and higher in the fall, probably October timeframe or later, we're going to start calling that the second wave. So when you hear people talking about, okay, right now we're in the middle of, we're getting the second wave because of this opening up of businesses, instead what it is actually the first wave has not completed yet. We have not gone away from the first wave, so we're just starting to see an uptick in that first wave. And what you're going to see is it upticking and coming down, upticking a little less and coming down, and upticking a little less. That's the goal behind this, to get it under control over the summer so we can prepare for it to come back in the fall and take the measures we know we need to take in order to make sure it's okay. Now, one of the measures they're talking about are masks. So a couple of things we know. Number one, masks work. There was a study out. I even mentioned this study. It was the New England Journal of Medicine. It's a very prestigious journal. And the study, this was PNAS. This is the National Association of Sciences. They actually came out with a study showing that the masks actually worked in Italy and New York, cutting down these cases by tens of thousands. Well, they're being asked to retract this study by a lot of scientists who are statisticians and other scientists who are saying it was a bit flawed, and their concern is that people will focus so much on masks they'll go away from social distancing. So that doesn't mean that masks are not working. What it means is that this study was saying that they can work by themselves in these certain types of areas and certain types of conditions. And what these guys are saying is, no, we can't really rely on that because it was a flawed study to a certain extent. So we need to make sure that we do masks and social distancing. And that's kind of the bottom line. We know those two go hand in hand. Neither one of them works by themselves. But the social distancing is probably the thing that works, or is the thing we know that works the best. That's 6 feet or more. Masks can add to that. Masks are best at protecting you from me if I'm wearing a mask and I have coronavirus. So if we're both wearing masks, we get that extra protection. But me having a mask will protect you. And so we're actually wearing masks to help protect other people, which is a wonderful community effort, a wonderful thing as humans to do for other humans. And so highly encouraged, to the point where right now, because of some upticks in different cases around the country, we are seeing different areas start to mandate masks. Governor Newsom in California is putting a mandate on masks in areas where people are going to congregate, can't social distance. In Houston area, there are certain counties in the area that are also starting to mandate masks. Oregon is starting to mandate masks. On the East Coast, you're starting to see some of those measures as well. In places where you're seeing these coronavirus cases start to spike up again, you're seeing people talk about mandating masks. This is a huge bone of contention. A lot of people don't want this to happen, but the reason they're doing it is because not enough people are wearing the masks. And so if we would wear masks, then we wouldn't necessarily have this mandate. And I know a lot of people have issues with wearing masks, of being told to wear masks. And what I tell them all the time is, for the last few decades, none of us have thought twice about walking into a store that has a sign, no shoes, no shirt, no service. What do? We put shoes on, we put shirts on, we make sure that we follow that sign's rules and go inside the store that way. Don't think twice about it. Yet now, for some people, thinking twice about masks has become an issue of contention. Not exactly sure why that's gotten to that point, but from a health perspective, masks are extremely important at getting this under control. And masks are also extremely important at getting us back to a near normal, meaning we're not going to have these shutdowns as much again. We're not going to have these issues going on, these small group gatherings as much again. Or restrictions of small group gatherings. If we can all wear masks and understand the reasons behind wearing those masks now, it can certainly help. And so hopefully that helps people understand a little bit better why we want people to wear masks and how masks can help. They're not the end all, they're not the only answer, and they're not certainly 100% protective against the virus, but they do go a long way towards protecting us. And the three big things I always talk about, wearing masks, social distancing, and gathering in small groups are the ways we can get this under control and defeat it, along with washing our hands 20 seconds before we touch our face can make sure we don't contract it that way either. So again, looking at the different things, the second wave, it's an issue of semantics. The second wave is what most experts talk about happening in the fall. Right now, we're just seeing upticks and upswings. In the first wave, we're still not through that. And then masks. I think you're going to see more of these mask mandates across the country. The issue is they've made the mandates but haven't talked about how they're going to enforce these. I know some airlines are saying if you get on the airline, masks are mandatory if you're not wearing a mask when you're on the airline. We're not going to do anything at that moment. We're simply going to offer you a mask and ask you to wear it. If you refuse, you're going to be put on a list, and that list is going to mean that you're not going to be able to fly on our airline anymore going forward, at least for a short-term period. So again, I know for some people they're inconvenient. For other people, they're a bit of a political issue, but masks certainly do help. So let me see now if we have any viewers' questions.
Shouldn't we call it physical distancing rather than social distancing? Why do they call it that?
The question is, should we call it physical distancing rather than social distancing? And I think the answer is yes, you could call it either one. The reason they came out with the term social distancing is because it's distancing you do while you're socializing to a certain extent. We know that when we're out and about, if the people aren't near us, it's easier to get away from them and get that physical distance of 6 feet, which is what we want, or more. But when we socialize with people, then it gets a little more tempting to get closer to them. And so I think they came out with the word social distance and say, well, when we're socializing, we want to make extra sure we're keeping that distance in play, that 6 foot distance. And I know a lot of people are doing this now, which I think is a wonderful thing. They're going out and they're having dinner parties, but those dinner parties are outside. Tables are 6 feet apart. Everybody gets their own food from a table that's already pre-made, pre-packaged, and they eat that way. So I can easily talk to somebody that's 6 feet away from me. I can easily talk to a group of people. We can have interactive conversations if we're 6 feet away from each other. That's simple to do, and it keeps us safe during this time period. So you're right, physical distancing, social distancing, the word doesn't matter as much as making sure that you stay that 6 feet apart. That's the important part here.
Do I need to wear a mask while in my home?
So the question is, do I need to wear a mask while I'm in my home? For the most part, the answer is no. If there's somebody in your home that is isolating because they have coronavirus and they're in a separate part of the house or in a separate room, using a separate bathroom, making sure they clean everything, you're still going to want to wear a mask, especially if you interact with them. If somebody comes over that's not in your quarantine circle and you can't do that 6 foot distancing, then you need to think about wearing a mask as well. And if you're living with somebody that's at high risk and you yourself are in an environment where you have a high potential of contacting COVID-19, then you might want to wear a mask as well to protect them. And that's usually the elderly, 65 or above. Those are those pre-existing conditions, which are diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, kidney issues, and even obesity. If they have those issues, 65 and above in particular, then yeah, wearing a mask if you're in an area where you're more likely to catch COVID-19 is a good thing. But for the most part, most of us don't need to wear masks inside our house or around our house.
How up to date are the COVID numbers? I've heard they're weeks behind.
So the COVID numbers, you're asking how up to date are the COVID numbers? It depends on your source. There are a couple sources out there. NBC News has a great source where we constantly put down the cases and the deaths that are happening, and we've kept that very, very up to date. They usually call during the day a bunch of counties around the country to find out what kind of reports they're getting, and they accumulate that. Johns Hopkins has a similar number as well. If you're looking at the government sources, they tend to lag a bit only because they're trying to get more official numbers. Our numbers are unofficial, as are Johns Hopkins and some of these other areas. but the government wants official numbers for their reporting purposes, so that tends to lag a little bit. For accuracy, either of those are good. For more current up-to-date numbers, again, I'd look at some of these non-governmental sites that are very good about keeping numbers, including NBC News.
Do certain blood types put you more at risk for COVID-19?
And this is something that's been going around for the past month or so about certain blood types, and actually started out of China, where they were starting to notice that people with certain blood types seem to have more complications from coronavirus versus other ones, and even to the point of maybe even catching it easier than other ones. And then this new study came out. This is a study that's in the New England Journal of Medicine, and what they found is looking at blood types. The blood type that seemed to do the worst with coronavirus was type A. And people with type A were 45% more likely to have complications and to catch coronavirus. People with type O were 35% less likely. So on a scale of blood types, type A was the worst for coronavirus, type B or type O was the best for coronavirus, but you have to take that with a little grain of salt. What that means is, statistically, a little more chance of having complications or a little more chance of catching it, not an overall chance. So if you have type A blood, this does not mean that you're going to catch coronavirus, you're going to have complications. This just means your chances are a little bit higher. The reason they think this is happening is some of the genes that are associated with our immune system are also associated with our blood types, particularly genes that basically give us this ACE2 receptor in our body. That ACE2 receptor is what the coronavirus latches onto to get inside our body. And people with type A have more likely of having that versus people with type B or having higher, or type O of having higher numbers of that. So again, looking at this statistically from a scientific point of view, it looks like type A has more issues with coronavirus, type O has less issues, and the other ones are down towards the less issues as well. But from your personal perspective of the type of blood you have, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. And besides, there's not a lot you can do about that other than protect yourself, which is something we all need to do anyway.
Can vitamin D lessen the effects of COVID-19?
So the question is, can vitamin D lessen the effects of COVID-19? And I think this question comes from a couple of months ago. There was a study out of England talking about vitamin D supplementation, helping people recover from corona or from COVID-19. And so from there, the story became, does vitamin D, does it help with COVID-19? Vitamin D, you certainly need to have adequate levels of vitamin D to help fight off COVID-19, because vitamin D helps your immune system be as strong as possible. But in a study in England and the UK, they were looking at people with severe deficiencies in vitamin D who got vitamin D supplemented did better than those that were not vitamin D supplemented. But again, these are people with severe deficiencies of vitamin D. So the question is, a lot of people, do I need to take a vitamin D supplement? For most of us, the answer is no, especially if your vitamin D levels are normal or near normal. It's not going to help you much more with this, with fighting off coronavirus. If you do want more vitamin D, sunlight is great. You want to make sure you use sunscreen and prevent skin cancer, but also 10 to 15 minutes a day of sun can certainly help, and it helps boost your mental health as well, being outside and about. Doing that is much better than actually taking supplements of vitamin D. But for most of us, we don't need that supplementation.
Is the type A blood type more common than the rest?
So the question is type A more common than the rest? The type O's tend to be the most common, so it's not as common, but it's not an uncommon blood type either. And if you look at when they're asking for blood donations, a lot of times they'll specify we want A or AB, because those are the ones we tend to not get as much. They're not as common as the O types of blood. But again, the difference being that it might be more contagious, more likely to catch coronavirus or suffer complications from it, but it's very, very small amount statistically that's going to happen. It's more of a scientific nuance than a personal issue.
Well, do you think schools will require students to wear masks when they go back to school all day?
So the question is, when students go back to school all day, will they be required to wear masks? I think what you're going to see, especially in the fall and especially before we get the vaccine, is a new normal in the schools. And this is going to be a temporary new normal. You're probably going to see students spaced out 6 feet apart, which means there are not going to be as many students in the classroom. So they're probably going to bring them back in groups. And one group might go Monday, Wednesday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, they're learning from home. The other group might go Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they're learning from home. When they're in school, they are probably going to eat lunch in their own classrooms. They're going to be 6 feet apart again. They're not going to interact as much. When they get out to recess, it's going to be recess where they're kind of on their own, but that's probably when they're going to wear masks, both going into school where they're interacting with other people and can't necessarily do that social distancing. Not so much when they're in the classroom, when they're able to stay at 6 feet apart, but if they go out on the playground or they go into recess, they're probably going to have to wear masks again. So my guess is it can be partial amounts during the day and other times not wearing masks. But again, I think you're going to see a lot of new processes put in place for when people do go back to school. Same thing as when we go back to work. Summer camps, if people go to summer camps, you're going to see these in play as well. There's going to be this temporary new normal we're going to be working with for the next year or so until we do get that vaccine and we can get that herd immunity up so that we're all protected from coronavirus.
Do you think we need to focus on educating our children about COVID? This seems long term.
So the question is, I think we need to focus on educating our children about COVID because this is going to be a long-term issue. And I think even the fact that it's been a short-term issue at this point, we're talking 4 months or so, I think it's important that we do talk to our children about COVID-19 for a couple reasons. One is because they do need to understand what's going on with COVID-19. They are hearing about this. It's not necessarily even in the background. If they are talking to other friends, if they're reading things, if they're hearing things online, you're probably watching TV and they're probably sitting in the room with you or going through the room and they can still hear it. Parental conversations, they pick up on those very, very well. As you know, children pick up on every little thing you do. And so they know about COVID-19. They're probably even a little concerned, maybe scared about COVID-19 and what that means. And I don't know, one of the big questions I get all the time is, are my parents going to die? Kids are very worried about that because we talk about the elderly. And usually I talk about 65 or older, but to a child, somebody 35 is old. And so, they get concerned about who might get sick from this and who might die from it. So talking to them about that is very important. Plus, as far as the long-term issues, this is going to be here for a while. And so this is going to be something they're going to grow up with. And if you think about it, we've all grown up with some kind of issue we've had when we were children that has affected us our whole lives and has changed things. And it was good to know about what was going on at the time. This is the same thing for them. This is going to be their generation, the thing they're dealing with. And so getting them educated now, but getting them educated the way you as a parent want them to be educated. This is not a time to scare them. The best thing you can do is sit down and say, what kind of questions do you have? What have you heard? And particularly, what have you heard about this? And it's easy. What have you heard about people dying from coronavirus? And they might say, I've heard that you might die because you're 30. 35, and you can chuckle and say, well, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about grandma, grandpa's age, somebody that's a lot older. On top of that, if you want some more information, NBC Nightly News has started a program, NBC Nightly News Kids, that is fantastic. I'm on the vast majority of those. We directly answer kids' questions. So if kids send in videos, of course with parental permission and help, they send in videos, I answer those videos online, those questions, we answer it. And it's NBC Nightly News /kids is the best way to get access to that. And it's usually pushed out every Tuesday and Thursday. And it's a great source. We get a lot of information about what's going on and answer their questions at a level that they would understand. And so again, think about that source, Nightly News with Kids. And so again, the headlines we've talked about, the second wave, we know it's coming in the fall. It's a matter of semantics. Right now, we're still in the first wave, haven't gotten through that, so we're seeing upswings in the first wave. We're not in the second wave yet. The concern is if this first wave meshes into the second wave and we have this big tsunami of cases, which we certainly don't want to have. And then masks. A lot of mandates are happening around the country. Understand why those mandates are happening. And the fact that, contrary to what some of the headlines are showing, masks are not 100%. They're not going to completely take care of us, but they are very, very helpful, and they do help reduce the risk of getting coronavirus, especially if you can't social distance. But the masks, social distancing, and not gathering in small groups are the three things we need in order to stay as protected as possible going forward. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and most importantly, please stay safe, stay happy, and stay healthy. Thanks.